Have you ever stopped to think how these huge global companies actually manage all their people? Across dozens of countries, different laws, different cultures. It must be incredibly complex.
Oh, absolutely. The scale is just staggering when you think about it.
Right. Well, today we're going to dig into that. We're taking a deep dive into human resource outsourcing, or HRO, as it's often called.
A really fascinating area.
Definitely. Our mission here is to sort of unpack the global HRO market. We'll look at its size now, where it's heading, and some really surprising differences between regions. We're looking at data from 2021 right through to 2033.
Hmm.
Basically, we want to pull out the key insights for you, give you a shortcut to getting a real handle on this vital industry.
And it is vital.
Exactly. And just so you know, all the numbers and insights we're discussing, they come straight from the Global Human Resource Outsourcing Market Analysis 2021-2033, provided by Cognitive Market Research.
And what's so interesting, I think, is how these numbers aren't just, abstract figures.
Yeah.
They genuinely tell a story.
A story. How so?
Well, they show us global business strategy in action, how companies are evolving the way they manage their workforce, where they're choosing to invest to get more efficient, or find specialized skills they might not have in-house.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, so let's start with that big picture then, the overall global market for HRO.
Right.
The report shows it's definitely on the rise. Back in 2021, it was valued at just over $35.3 billion.
A substantial base to start from.
Indeed.
Yeah.
By 2025, that's expected to climb past $42 billion. But here's the really big number. The projection for 2033 is a market worth over $60 billion. 60.044 billion to be precise.
Wow, that's significant growth.
It really is. And it translates to a pretty consistent compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of 4.52% across that whole forecast period.
And that consistency is key, isn't it? That 4.5% year after year.
What does that tell you?
Well, if we connect it back to that bigger picture we mentioned, it's not just a blip. It signals a really fundamental shift, a long-term trend.
A shift in how businesses operate.
Exactly. Businesses globally are increasingly deciding not to handle every single HR function internally. They're recognizing the strategic value of outsourcing certain parts to specialized partners.
Yeah.
It's becoming, a core part of the strategy for many.
Okay, so that's the global view. Steady, significant growth. Now, how does this break down when we look at different parts of the world? Let's start with North America. It seems like they're leading the pack, at least in terms of overall size.
Typically the case in many global markets, right?
Mhm.
Maturity, scale.
Right. So in 2021, the North American HRO market was worth just over $14.3 billion.
Yeah.
By 2025, that's projected to be nearly $17 billion. And then looking out to 2033, it's expected to hit around $23 billion.
So it's still growing strongly, even off a large base.
Yeah, the CAGR there is just over 4%.
Yeah.
4.037% specifically. Now, digging into North America, no surprises, the U.S. is the giant.
Dominant, I imagine.
Absolutely. It accounted for almost $9.3 billion back in 2021, and that's forecast to grow to over $14.2 billion by 2033. Canada's doing well, too, growing from about $3.5 billion to nearly $6 billion over the same period. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Oh.
Mexico. Its market was about $1.6 billion in 2021, but by 2033, it's projected to reach almost $3 billion.
So nearly doubling.
Exactly. And that growth is driven by the highest regional CAGR within North America, a really impressive 5.334%.
Now that is interesting. You've got the mature, massive U.S. market growing steadily, but then Mexico posting this really rapid growth rate.
What do you make of that?
Well, it raises a fascinating question, doesn't it? While the U.S. is the heavyweight, Mexico's acceleration suggests something dynamic is happening there. Maybe increased foreign investment, maybe the rise of nearshoring, driving demand for quick, compliant HR setups.
Could be. Needing to scale quickly without building huge internal HR teams from scratch.
Precisely. It suggests a rapidly evolving landscape, maybe even a bit of leapfrogging in terms of adopting these HRO models within an already established economic region. It definitely signals that emerging economies, even within developed regions, are embracing HRO quite aggressively.
Yeah, that Mexican number really jumps out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. How does Europe stack up?
Right. Europe. Let's see.
The market there was valued at nearly $10 billion, $9.85 billion back in 2021.
Okay, so smaller than North America, but still substantial.
Yes. And it's projected to grow to over $16 billion by 2033. The CAGR for Europe is solid, 4.184%, pretty comparable to North America's overall rate.
So steady growth there, too. Any standouts within Europe?
There are. The United Kingdom actually shows the strongest growth rate among the major economies. Its market is set to grow from about 1.8 billion in 2021 to almost 3.3 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of over 5.2%.
Ah, interesting. So the UK is outpacing the European average.
Seems so. Germany is also a major player, naturally, growing from 1.85 billion to over 3.2 billion. France shows solid growth too, around 4.4% CAGR.
Okay.
But then you see some more modest growth figures. Italy, for instance, has a KGR of just under 3%, reaching about 933 million by 2033. And Spain actually has the lowest AGR in the region, just 2.7% or so.
So quite a varied picture within Europe itself.
Definitely.
And that's what's fascinating, I think. You see these distinct patterns.
Yeah.
It's not monolithic. Some economies are clearly adopting HRO faster than others.
Why do you think that is? Different business cultures, regulations?
Probably a mix of all those things. Different business environments, certainly.
Yeah.
Regulatory frameworks around employment can vary hugely across Europe, which definitely impacts HR needs and potentially the appeal of outsourcing.
Next.
And yes, maybe cultural factors too, varying levels of, shall we say, corporate willingness to outsource functions traditionally seen as core. The UK often has a more flexible labor market approach compared to, say, Germany or France, which might partially explain its faster HRO adoption rate.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Okay, now hold on to your hats, because the next region shows some truly explosive growth.
I think I know where you're going. Asia Pacific.
You got it. The Asia Pacific region, or APAC, the market there started at nearly $7 billion in 2021.
Okay, so smaller than Europe initially.
Yes, but listen to this. By 2033, it's forecast to hit $13.6 billion.
Wow, almost doubling its 2021 size.
More than doubling, actually. And this is underpinned by the highest regional CAGR globally, a really impressive 5.732%.
That's the global growth engine right there.
Absolutely. Now, within APAC, China is the leader in terms of market size. It's expected to grow from about 2.4 billion to over 5.2 billion by 2033. That's a strong CAGR in itself, over 6.4%.
Very strong.
But here's the number that really stands out globally. India.
Go on.
India shows the highest national KGR anywhere in the world in this report, an astounding 7.537%. Its market is projected to grow from around 719 million in 2021 to over 1.7 billion by 2033.
7.5% COGR. That's remarkable. Truly remarkable.
Isn't it? Japan and South Korea also contribute significantly, with KGRs around 4% and 5.5% respectively.
So widespread growth across the major APAC economies.
Mostly. Interestingly, the report notes that Southeast Asia as a segment is actually lagging a bit. It has the lowest CGR in the region, just under 2%, reaching only about $492 million by 2033.
Any indication why?
The report doesn't specify, but one could speculate. Perhaps market fragmentation, different stages of economic development within that subregion.
Could be. But then you contrast that with another finding.
Which is?
The rest of APAC category, so countries beyond the specifically named ones. That segment actually achieves the highest TGR within the region, an incredible 7.758%.
Wow. So the growth isn't just confined to China and India. It's happening broadly across many other developing nations in the region, too.
Precisely. And if we connect that back to the bigger picture, APAC's overall leadership and growth just underscores the immense potential there. The business landscapes are evolving so rapidly.
Companies needing HR solutions fast.
Exactly. This aggressive HRO adoption suggests businesses are heavily leveraging external expertise. They need help managing their expanding workforces, streamlining operations, navigating local complexities. It's all fueling their economic expansion.
And it really makes you wonder.
What's that?
Well, how is this rapid shift going to reshape their talent strategies? What does it mean for the nature of work itself in those incredibly dynamic economies?
That is the big question, isn't it? The long-term impact on workforce development and corporate structure. Fascinating stuff.
Okay, let's broaden the scope again. We've covered North America, Europe, and APAC. What about the other regions? Let's start with South America.
Right. Another area often showing dynamic growth.
The market there was nearly $1.8 billion in 2021. It's forecasted to reach over 3.1 billion by 2033. That's a healthy CAGR of almost 4.85%.
Solid growth, higher than North America or Europe on average.
Indeed, Brazil is the leader in South America, growing from about 822 million to over 1.4 billion by 2033. But check this out. Colombia.
Another high growth spot.
You guessed it. Colombia had achieved a really remarkable CAGR of 6.529%. Its market is set to more than double, moving from about 135 million to nearly $290 million.
Wow, another standout growth story, similar in Mexico or India in terms of rate.
Exactly. Okay, next up, the Middle East.
Okay.
The market there was around $1.4 billion in 2021, projected to grow to almost $2.6 billion by 2033. That's another strong CAGR, over 5.1%.
So consistently high growth across several of these emerging regions.
Seems to be the trend. Saudi Arabia is leading the charge in the Middle East, expected to nearly double its market size to over $1 billion, with a CAGR above 5.5%.
Makes sense given the economic diversification efforts there.
Good point. And finally, let's look at Africa.
Right. Often a complex picture there.
The African HRO market grew from about $960 million in 2021 and is projected to reach over $1.5 billion by 2033. The overall CAGR is a bit lower here, around 3.6%.
Still growth, but more moderate compared to APAC or the Middle East.
Right. And interestingly, Nigeria, despite being the continent's largest economy, actually has the lowest CAGR noted in the region, just 2.6%, reaching under 390 million by 2033.
That is noteworthy.
South Africa, on the other hand, showed better performance, with a CAGR closer to 4%.
So again, variation within the region is key.
Definitely.
You know, what's really compelling when you look across South America, the Middle East, and Africa is just how distinct the drivers seem to be in each place.
How so?
Well, you've got different phases of economic development playing out in South America, perhaps linked to commodity cycles or industrial growth. In the Middle East, maybe it's more about building new economic centers and attracting global business. And Africa, well, it's incredibly diverse with varying levels of infrastructure, different regulatory environments, country by country.
All creating unique needs and opportunities for HRO providers.
Exactly. All these local factors contribute uniquely to the global HRO picture. It's not one size fits all. Each market really does present its own specific set of challenges, but also, clearly, opportunities.
Okay, so we've toured the globe, looked at the numbers. Let's try to pull it all together. What's the big takeaway for global business and HR strategy from all this data?
Well, the clearest message is that HRO isn't niche anymore. It's mainstream and growing strongly globally.
Right. The market is definitely on a solid upward path. We saw Asia Pacific and South America leading the way in terms of growth rates, the CAGR. That signals really high potential, doesn't it? Rapidly evolving business needs.
Absolutely. Those are the hotspots for future growth.
Meanwhile, North America and Europe, while maybe not growing quite as fast, are still the biggest markets by far. They're more mature, stable centers for HRO activity.
Representing the bulk of the current market value.
Exactly. And maybe the most actionable insight for businesses looking ahead. Those emerging markets we highlighted, India, China, Colombia, that rest of APAC group, parts of the Middle East, they present really significant, lucrative opportunities for the HRO industry going forward. That's where the next big wave of adoption seems likely to be concentrated.
And stepping back even further, I think the sustained growth across such different regions, it really speaks volumes. It shows a global recognition that managing people effectively requires specialization and efficiency.
Companies everywhere are seeing the value.
Yes, they're increasingly looking to external partners to help them navigate the growing complexity of HR, whether it's compliance, talent acquisition, payroll, whatever it might be. And this just raises that crucial question again. How will businesses continue to leverage these outsourcing opportunities, not just for cost savings or scaling, but strategically? How will they use HRO to innovate, to become more agile, to really adapt to the future of work in the next decade?
That's the key question, isn't it? Food for thought. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the human resource outsourcing market. We really hope you feel more informed now, maybe got some new perspectives on the forces shaping our global economy.
It's been a fascinating discussion. And maybe leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Please do.
Okay, consider this. We see the HRO market expanding robustly. So what's the next frontier? Will outsourcing push deeper into highly specialized niche HR functions that companies usually keep very close? Things like maybe leadership development or complex compensation design. Or perhaps, will the next wave be about an even deeper integration of technology? More AI, more sophisticated data analytics embedded within these outsourced services. And crucially, whatever direction it takes, what impact will those shifts have on companies, on employees, on the very nature of work itself?
Lots to think about there. A perfect place to leave it. Until next time, keep digging, keep learning, and keep exploring.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're at a point where you really need to get up to speed fast on a huge shift in how companies handle their people. That's basically what we're doing today. A deep dive into the human resource outsourcing market, HRO. Our info comes from some pretty comprehensive research, specifically a report called Human Resource Outsourcing, Drivers, Restraints, and Future Trends.
Right.
So the goal here is to pull out the really essential stuff, the key takeaways you need to understand the forces shaping workforces everywhere. Maybe you're prepping for a meeting, or maybe you're just really curious about business trends.
And what's fascinating, I think, is just how big this is. HRO's impact, I mean.
Yeah.
It's not some small niche thing.
No.
No, it's really reshaping how work gets managed across almost every industry you can think of. So this dive, it's not just what HRO is, but really why it's become so central, why it's changing how companies operate on a global scale.
Okay, so if it's having that kind of impact, what's actually fueling it? What are the main drivers behind this HRO boom? Where do we start?
Well, at its heart, it really comes down to efficiency, that fundamental business need.
Efficiency. Okay.
Yeah, the research clearly shows companies are, increasingly outsourcing those core HR tasks, things like payroll, recruiting help, keeping up with compliance, managing benefits.
The admin-heavy stuff.
Exactly. And by doing that, their internal HR folks, they can kind of shed that load and really focus on the more strategic side of the business.
So what does that actually, mean for a business trying to stay nimble? Like the internal team finally gets to focus on talent development or culture instead of chasing paperwork.
Precisely. The source material mentions things like reduced internal workload, more agility in how work flows, leaner HR teams, and that leads to better productivity and, lower overhead costs, too.
Right. That makes sense.
And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about way more than just saving a buck or making life easier for the internal team.
Okay.
Another huge driver is that mix of cost reduction plus getting access to specialized expertise almost instantly. Ah, okay. So it's not just cheaper, it's smarter too.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Think about it. You avoid all the costs of finding, hiring, training, and keeping a big in-house HR department. That's huge.
Yeah, definitely.
But maybe even more importantly, these HRO firms, they bring deep current knowledge, regulatory compliance, tax laws, tricky benefit stuff. They live and breathe this.
Which is massive for, say, a startup or an SME, right?
Oh, absolutely. For startups, for SMEs, it's like getting a top-tier HR department overnight. They handle the whole employee life cycle smoothly, make sure you're following all the local labor laws. It's value that goes way beyond just the cost savings. It's like an instant capability upgrade.
And it's not just about making things run smoothly inside the company, is it? Reviewing the research, what really jumped out at me was the global piece. Here's where it gets really interesting. The challenge of managing people all over the world. As businesses expand globally, it must become incredibly complex. Different laws, cultures, time zones. How do HRO providers actually help with that? Yeah, that's a huge area. They basically become essential partners for going global.
How so?
Well, they offer that region-specific compliance knowledge, first off. They can provide customer service in multiple languages. They develop HR solutions that are actually localized.
So they know the rules in Germany and Japan?
Pretty much. Imagine trying to keep track of labor laws changing constantly in, say, 50 different countries. Or figuring out benefit norms across totally different cultures. HROs take on that massive headache.
Right.
It lets companies manage diverse, spread out teams without getting totally bogged down. It's like having global reach, but with local know-how.
Okay, that definitely paints a picture of the upside. But outsourcing isn't always a simple fix, is it? The research must have flagged some risks or downsides, too. What are the trade-offs?
Absolutely. And this raises an important question, about what you might give up. A really significant restraint companies mention is the potential loss of control over those internal HR functions.
Loss of control.
Yeah.
How does that play out?
Well, when you hand things over, you might find you have less visibility day to day. Maybe slower responses when critical or sensitive HR issues pop up. And that can make it tougher to really maintain your specific company culture, your core values, which, downstream could mean less engaged employees, maybe even hurting retention. It's a balancing act.
That's not just a feeling of losing control. There's a very real risk around security
Oh, definitely. Data privacy and confidentiality risks are a huge concern.
because you're sharing super sensitive data, employee records, company info.
Exactly. You're handing it to a third party.
Yeah.
That automatically opens up potential vulnerabilities, cybersecurity threats, legal compliance issues if they slip up,
And the fallout from that could be massive. Legal trouble, reputational damage.
and a big drop in employee trust. If there's a breach or data gets mishandled, that can really undermine everything. It can be devastating.
Okay, so control and data security are big ones. What else?
Well, another point the research brought up is the limited flexibility you sometimes get with certain HRO providers.
Meaning like a one-size-fits-all approach?
Sort of, yeah. Standardized services are efficient, sure, but those models might not perfectly match your specific business goals or your strategic HR plans.
Right, if you have unique needs.
Exactly. That lack of customization can get in the way of personalization, especially for things like recruitment or onboarding or developing your people. It's particularly tough for, say, fast-growing companies or businesses in really specialized fields. If you're constantly changing, a rigid HRO setup can actually hold you back.
Okay, so those are some real challenges to navigate. But the market isn't standing still, is it? It must be evolving to address these things. What does the future look like? What trends are shaping HRO now?
Yeah, it's definitely evolving, and probably the biggest trend, hands down, is the growing integration of AI and automation into HR services.
AI and HR outsourcing, how does that work?
Well, the source mentions providers already using AI for things like super fast resume screening, using chatbots for instant employee support, predictive analytics to figure out who might be likely to leave.
Wow, predicting attrition.
Yeah, and why? And even automating complex stuff like payroll calculations and compliance checks.
So the benefit there isn't just doing things faster, I assume. It's about accuracy too, intelligence.
Exactly. It's not just speed. These tools reduce human error, they help streamline decision-making. It allows HROs to offer smarter, quicker, and much more personalized services, especially at scale. It's a real game changer.
Okay, AI is one big wave. What else?
Alongside AI, you've got the massive shift to cloud-based HR platforms. They're becoming fundamental.
Why are cloud platforms so important here?
Their significance is huge, really. They let companies manage HR stuff remotely from anywhere. You get real-time data access. They integrate smoothly with other business tools you're already using.
So better access, more flexibility.
And scalability. Whether your team is in one office or spread across continents, the cloud gives you that transparency and operational continuity. It makes HR truly global and always accessible.
Interesting. And the last trend.
Well, this one feels like a really positive shift. There's a growing emphasis on employee experience and wellness.
So it's becoming less about just admin and efficiency and more with the actual people.
Exactly. It's moving beyond just the traditional functions. Modern HRO partners are really stepping up.
How so? What kind of services?
They're offering things like mental health support resources, digital wellness programs, consulting focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, even sophisticated analytics to measure employee engagement.
That's a big evolution from just processing payroll.
It really is. It ties directly into what today's workforce needs and expects. It helps companies hit their satisfaction goals, and ultimately, it boosts retention. It's almost like HRO is becoming a partner in building a better workplace culture.
Fascinating shift.
So just to quickly sum up, the HRO market is really in a period of transformative growth. You've got efficiency needs, the challenges of going global, and all this tech evolution pushing it forward. But at the same time, businesses absolutely need to stay sharp on issues like control, data security, and making sure the service actually fits their specific needs.
You can't just outsource and forget it.
No, definitely not. But seeing AI, the cloud, and the stronger focus on employees all coming together, it points to a future for HRO that's going to be dynamic, competitive, and hopefully really beneficial.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this as you navigate this changing world of work? I think this deep dive really shows how those lines between your internal HR team and an external HRO partner are more than just blurring. They're getting woven together really tightly. It's leading to a whole new idea of what workforce management even means. It points to a future where that human touch, that understanding of people has to blend perfectly with really advanced technology.
Yeah, it's that blend.
Right. Not just for things to run smoothly, but to actually keep employees happy and engaged, which in the end is what drives business success. So as these trends keep unfolding, figuring out that dance between people and platforms, that's going to be absolutely key to staying ahead.